Hey, how's it going? I'm Andrew with the Board Game Rundown, and today I'll be showing you how to play Farshore, a new board game in the Everdell universe.
And you can say the title's only 3 words.
Let's begin with our rundown elements. First, I'm going to show you the mechanics of the game. Next, we're going to talk about the object of the game, and then we're going to get into the setup. Farshore runs on a few familiar mechanics that are familiar to most board gamers. These are worker placement, resource management, tableau building, and advancing along a victory point track. Now, the object of the game, it's pretty simple. How do you win? The short answer is just getting the most victory points. There's a lot of ways you can get victory points in Farshore. So let's talk about a few of the ways now. You can gain victory points by playing cards in your city, by storing and accumulating treasure tokens, by gaining map tokens, and by advancing your ship along the ship track around the board. Now, let's get right to the setup so you can start playing Farshore. Now, let's actually set up the game. Start by taking your board and placing it in the center of your table. Next, you'll want to set up your lighthouse. You can follow the instructions in the rulebook for how to set this up, and then put it at the very top of the board. Next, take a pile of your seashells and place them next to the game board. These little tokens are worth 1 point at the end of the game. Next to them, put these treasure chests. These treasure chests count as any resource. They're kind of like a wild. These are also worth 2 victory points at the end of the game. I want to clarify that these do not count as resources when referring to a resource that you acquire on a card, but they do act as any resource for spending purposes. Next, we're going to set up the map tiles. Now, based on the number of players, we're going to have to change this up a little bit, but let's do it. For a 2-player game, use the 1x, the 1x, and the 2x map tile, placing the 2x on top. Make sure you do this for all of your tiles. In a game with 3 players, use a 2x tile, a 1x tile, and a 0x tile. Once again, placing the lowest multiplier on the bottom and the highest multiplier on top. In a game with 4 players, use all of the tiles, placing the 2 on top, the 1s in the middle, and the 0 on the bottom. When you're done setting it up, it should look like this. All of your map tiles arranged in ascending order on your sand. Now, give your island tiles a shuffle, and based on the number of players, place the number of tiles face up in the islands section of your board. These are spaces that your workers can go to and activate for resources. The rest can go in the box. Next, sort your windrose tiles into A and B stacks. Face down, give them a good shuffle, and then place them in the field near the top of the board. Flip over the top one of each letter, and those are your windrose conditions for the current round. Now, pick up the deck of main cards. These are the cards with the ship image on the back. Go ahead and shuffle them up and put them just on the inside of your lighthouse. We're now ready to set up the bay. In a very Everdell-like fashion, place 8 cards in the middle of the board, making your market called the bay. If you ever have a duplicate, place it on top of the first copy and continue placing until you have 8 unique cards in the bay. Now, place the remaining cards above the board, tucked into your lighthouse, to form the draw pile for the rest of the game. When you discard any cards for any reason, you'll place them on the other side of the lighthouse, right here. Remember, whenever you discard a card, always make sure it's face down. And if you ever need to draw a card but you don't have any here, go ahead and reshuffle the cards in your discard pile. Each player is now going to draw a different number of cards based on their position in the game. The first player is going to draw 5 cards. The second player draws 6, the third player draws 7, and the fourth player draws 8. After looking at your cards, you can actually discard all of them if you don't like your hand, and you can mulligan one time for the same number of cards. For example, if you went second and you had 6 cards and you didn't like them, you can draw 6 new cards, but you can only do this once, only during the setup. Now, each player chooses a worker type. Take 3 worker tokens for the type you choose and put these in your play area in front of you. Then place one of these workers into your ship with a sail of the matching color. And place that ship in the starting place on the outside track where it says start. Finally, each player gets 3 anchor tokens. Put these in your play area. Okay, now let's go through the gameplay. The rules say that the saltiest player goes first, and I don't think I've ever not gone first playing this game. So let's continue on. In Everdell fashion, you can choose just one of 3 actions, and they're very familiar to the original Everdell game. You can place a worker, play a card, or prepare for the next season. If you choose to place a worker, you can put 1 worker token from your play area on any space on the board and gain that reward shown. For example, here, I would gain 3 driftwood. I want to call to your attention that all of these spaces have webbed footprints, but some have 1 and some have 3. A location with 1 footprint symbol means only 1 worker can be there at a time. If a worker is already on that location, you can't place another worker there. I'd like you to notice that every location on the board has webbed footprint, but a location with 1 footprint means that only 1 worker can be there at a time. If a worker is already on that location, then you can't place another worker there. For example, I can't place my worker here because there is already a red worker here. However, some locations show multiple footprints, and those can have any number of workers on them at the same time. For example, the docks. The board can be broken up into a few sections. There are 4 different shoreline locations in Farshore, each of them giving a different basic resource in the game. When you visit a shoreline location, take the number of resources shown and put them into your play area. Another section of the board includes the islands. Remember, you set up islands at the beginning of the game based on the number of players. The island tiles provide unique combinations of resources. For example, in this island we have 1 piece of driftwood and 2 seaweed. At the docks location, you can discard up to 3 cards from your hand to get 1 resource for each card you discarded. These can be different resource types. So if I discard 2 cards, I can take 1 seaweed, and I can also take 1 driftwood. At the lookout location, you can discard any number of cards from your hand and then draw up to your hand limit from the deck or from the bay. You don't have to just pick one or the other, but you can draw cards from the deck and some from the bay if you want. One caveat though, if you draw a card from the bay, you can't replenish it immediately. You have to draw from the cards that you were given. I want to make a special note here. Discarding any number includes 0, so you don't have to discard anything if you don't want to, and you can still draw all the way up to 8 cards, which is your hand limit. You can also place a worker on any destination card in your city that doesn't already have a worker. Place your worker on the card to activate the ability on that text. For example, the cartographer says, copy any shoreline or face-up island location. I want to note really quick that you're not allowed to play a worker on a card in the bay. In order to play a worker onto a card, it has to be bought and played into your city. And finally, you can place a worker on the dunes location to take a map tile and put it into your play area. Mind you, you do have to have the listed card types played in your city to get the given map tile, and you must take the top map tile in the stack. For example, to claim this map tile, you have to have 4 green production cards played in your city. To claim this one, you have to have one of each card type in your city, and you get the point for the rest. And this is important. Map tiles are worth victory points at the end of the game. Each tile has multipliers on them, so some map tiles are worth more if you have other map tiles alongside them in your play area at the end of the game. For example, if I ended the game with these 3 map tiles, I would get the following points. 2 points times the number of map tiles. So 2 times 1, 2, 3. So 6 points. I would also get 6 points here, and 1 point times the number of map tiles. 1, 2, 3. So 6 plus 6 plus 3, 15 points. The second action you can take in Farshore is to choose to play a card. You can choose to play the card either from your hand or from the cards available in the bay. To play a card, you must pay the resources shown on the card, whether it's from your hand or in the bay. In this example, I'm going to buy a card from the bay. Notice here my favorite card in the game, the Postal Pigeon. The Postal Pigeon has a resource cost of 2 mushrooms. So I'm going to take 2 mushrooms and put it back into the resource area. I'm going to take this card and put it somewhere in my city, which we'll get to later. If you play a card from the bay and there are no cards left in this stack here, you need to immediately replace it by drawing a card from the deck and replacing that spot. Oops, I drew a duplicate, so I'm going to put that on top of the other diver and draw another card. I'd like to take a minute to talk about the different card types in Farshore. If you're familiar with Everdell, this should sound very familiar. In Farshore, there are critters and constructions. Within those are unique critters and common critters. Similarly, we have common constructions and unique constructions. In your city, there can only be one unique construction of a similar card type. For example, I can only have one market in my city. But common constructions, you can have multiple of the same type. So in this example, I could have multiple groves in my city. Notice that each card is worth a specific amount of victory points at the end of the game if they are in your city. For example, the governor is worth 4 points. These pearls tell you how many copies of that card are in the deck. Each card in the game has a cost. You'll notice here that all critters cost a different amount of mushrooms, where constructions cost different combinations of the other resources. For example, the grove costs 2 driftwood and 1 seaweed. This symbol here means any resource. You can mix any 3 resources together and build the market. Next to that resource costs, we have the card types, which we'll get to later. Below that is the card text, which you will follow either when you play a card or at different parts of the game. Now, I mentioned earlier that you can buy critters in a different way, and that involves the 3 anchor tokens from your play area that you were given at the beginning of the game. Let's see how these anchor tokens can be utilized to purchase critters in a different way. In this example, I want to play the treasure hunter from my hand, but I don't have enough mushrooms. So I'm going to use my anchor that I was given at the start of the game to pay for this treasure hunter. What you're going to want to do is look at the card type of the critter that you want to buy. And then in your city, if you have a matching card type, which I do here, notice the grove, put the anchor onto that card, and then you can play your card at no other cost. Now, let's go over the card colors. I just want to say beforehand, if you've already played Everdell before, you don't really need to pay attention here. All of the symbols mean the same exact thing, but if you'd like to listen as a refresher, feel free to join. Production cards have a green icon with a stem and a leaf image. They have an effect that happens immediately when they're played. Other game effects can activate them again, such as moving on to another season. They activate, for example, when you prepare for spring and autumn. Governance cards have a blue icon with a scroll image. They grant bonuses to other card plays and certain actions. They don't trigger themselves when they're played, though, so if you play a blue card, you don't do what the card says when you specifically play that card. For example, the Lighthouse Keeper, which is mentioned in my top 10, says you may draw one card after you play a card. Well, except this card. You can play this, and then any future cards you play in your city allow you to draw a card using the Lighthouse Keeper. Traveler cards have a brown icon with a bindle image. These activate just one time, immediately when played. Destination cards have a red icon with a footprint image. They act as locations where you can place your workers. They don't activate when played, but you must play a worker there in order to activate the ability. And finally are the prosperity cards. These have a purple color and they have a little flower in the middle. These are end game effects typically worth a lot of bonus points. Just add up the amount of bonus points at the end of the game that pertain to your city and your location on the board, and that's how many points that card is worth. These are major points, so you might want to invest in a few of these. Just like in Everdell, you can only play a maximum of 15 cards in your city, unless a card states otherwise. For example, the Shipwreck and the Castaway say, this card does not take up space in your city. I like to put these cards off to the side to remind myself that they are not part of my 15 cards. Anytime you get to draw a card, you have to draw it from the top of the deck. You can't draw it from the bay unless an ability explicitly says you can. Now, your hand limit is limited to 8 cards. You can never draw beyond this. If something would cause you to draw more cards than your hand limit, you only draw up to 8. That's your hand limit. There's no exceptions to this. You are capped out at 8. And you can't give a card to another player if that player is already at their hand limit. If something tells you to take this action, you instead discard the card, but you still gain the benefit of giving the card. So if all of my opponents had 8 cards and I had to give one away in order to gain a seashell, I would simply discard that card and still gain the point. After a card has been played from the bay and you need to replace a card, if it's ever a duplicate, stack it on top of the card that it matches, similar to setup. Continue drawing until no duplicates exist. If there are no cards left in the deck and you need to draw a card, pick up the discard pile, shuffle it, and place it back where your draw pile was. Remember, when you're discarding cards, always keep them face down. Keeping that information hidden is very important. One unique feature about Farshore is the fact that you can move your ship around the board, not only gaining resources, but also gaining a lot of victory points. So let's learn about how to move our ships now. The first way your ship can move around the board is by playing cards into your city. Sloop, for example, immediately upon playing, and whenever the green symbol shows up during seasons, allows you to move your ship 2 spaces. The other way you can move your ship is by playing cards in your city that match the current windrose conditions on the A and B stack on your board. In this example, if you play a critter, or if you play a card that has the governance icon, move your ship forward 1 position. And yes, if you play a critter with a governance icon, you move your ship up 2 positions, 1 for each requirement met. For example, if I played the Scribe, which is a critter, I would then move my ship up 1 space because the current windrose condition requires me to play a critter. Anytime you land on or move past a treasure icon on the track, go ahead and grab a treasure token and put it into your supply. Remember, this counts as any resource or 2 victory points at the end of the game. Finally, the location of your ship at the end of the game can get you some bonus victory points too. For example, here, the yellow player would get 38 points. If you manage to make it all the way to the 60-point space during the game, your ship has completed its journey and can't move any further. Congratulations. The third action you can take in Farshore is preparing for the next season. When all your workers are placed on locations and either you choose not to play a card or you can't play a card, then you prepare for the next season. The game begins in winter, so you'll have 3 seasons in sequence after that: spring, summer, and then autumn. Note that players each prepare for a season when they're ready, or when they must. This doesn't mean you'll all do it on the same turn, though. It also means that once you've prepared, you can move on to the next season, and other players can keep playing in their season. This is very similar to the original Everdell. For each season change, you retrieve all of your workers, you gain 1 new worker from the stockpile, and you move on to the next season by gaining the bonus listed for that season. Let's go over each of those right now. When preparing for spring, activate all green production cards in your city. You can do this in any order you want to. If you're the last player preparing for spring, you have a very special responsibility. You have the windrose tiles to take care of. Move the top windrose tile to the bottom of the stack for each letter. And then flip over the top tile to reveal the new conditions for moving your ship. In this case, if you play a critter, or if you play a card with a red tag on it, then these are what will trigger ship movement in the new season. When preparing for summer, you draw 2 cards from the bay, if you can. Remember, 8-card hand limit. Remember to refill any empty slots and stack any duplicates in the market. Then, if you're the last player preparing for summer, you choose 2 island tiles and flip them over face down. These cannot be used for the rest of the game. Also, remember to take care of your windrose tiles during the summer as well. This will always take place with the last person who prepares for summer. When preparing for autumn, you can draw 2 cards from the deck, or 2 cards from the bay, or 1 from each. If you're the last player preparing for autumn, you once again advance the windrose tiles for the next season. If you've reached the end of autumn and you can't perform any more actions or choose not to, you finish the game. The rest of your turns are passed as the other players finish their game of Farshore. A player who has finished the game can't be given any cards or resources, but, and this is important, their workers do remain on the board and potentially block other worker locations. Remember, if a location has 3 feet, you can still go there, even if somebody's worker is there. But if a player is blocking a location that only has 1 webbed foot, you can't go there. Sorry. If you're the only player who hasn't finished and you have to give cards or resources to a player, you just discard them instead. And once all players have finished, count up the final victory point score for each. And we're going to add those up now. I'd like to take some time to teach you how to total up all your points in Farshore. So there's many things that you're going to have to add together. So let's start. First, you're going to take your totals of all of your seashell values on your cards. So let's add them together. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So you're going to take 17, and then you're going to add the number of seashells, 17, and then I have 7 seashells here. 17 plus 7 is 24. Your treasure chests at the end of the game are worth 2 points each. I have 1, so that gives me 2 points. Then your purple cards. I have 2 purple cards here. 1 gives me 3 points for each purple card in my city, and I have 2 of them, so I get 6 points for that. Plus, this gives me 1 point for each treasure token I have. So I have 1, so that gives me a bonus point. Finally, you're going to add up your map tokens. And what I like to do is I like to add the value on the seashells times the number of actual map tokens that I have. So 5 times 3 tokens is 15. Finally, you're going to give yourself points based on the location of your ship. In this example, my ship is on 38. So if I take all of these numbers and add them together, my final score is 86 points. And that is how to play Farshore. I want to thank you guys for watching. Once again, my name is Andrew, and this is the Board Game Rundown. And for now, happy sailing.